Overwatch is a frustrating game. No matter how you try to slice it, this has been the case for years. It's the case with Overwatch 2, and it was the case with Overwatch 1 for about 95% of the community. This does not necessarily make it a bad game though, because the highs of playing Overwatch when your team is really, synced up and you're all coordinating and you're winning, it's a really great feeling, and it kind of balances out the lows. In this video, we're going to rank every single hero based off of how annoying they are, and we're going to give a tip on how to counter each one of them. The absolute best way to find yourself a Valentine this year is going to be getting GM in Overwatch 2. There is no better place to find that special someone than the Overwatch 2 ranked ladder, and if you're trying to find your next high ranked honey, you need to go to GameLeap today. We have hundreds of guides with more coming every single week, designed specifically to help you soar up the ranks and find your special someone. Don't find yourself alone this Valentine's Day. Click on the link in the description below or go to GameLeap.com to get your subscription today. Starting off in our lowest tier, we have the not annoying tier, as I've called it, and these are going to be characters that have very clear ways to counterplay them, maybe a little bit of annoyance in their kit but not a lot, and they're just very simple to react to. Starting us off in the not annoying tier, we have Brigitte. Brig used to be one of the most annoying characters in the game, but when they removed her stun for Overwatch 2 and also have over the years reduced her sustainability, she really started to become a lot more engaging to play against. And the most straightforward counter to Brig is making sure that you're playing in distant spaces where she can't really easily get her Inspire off, and you're making sure to spam her every second that you get. Her shield is relatively weak when you're actually shooting at her, and the fact that she needs to be within melee range to be doing consistent heals makes it so that she's very vulnerable to spam type heroes. Next to the not annoying tier, we have Reinhardt. Ryan is in a pretty similar boat as Brig, where he is really only melee ranged focus. He has a little bit of mobility with his pin now, but as long as you're getting angles either around his shield and spamming him to force him back, or you're breaking his shield so he's forced to back up, then you should for the most part be okay. Remember, characters in this tier are going to have very clear ways of counterplay. Next up we have Symmetra, who's also a short range character, but the difference is she does a lot of damage very quickly, and her teleport allows for her to suddenly flank much like a Reaper could. One of my favorite ways to counter Sim is to not shoot at the teleporter exit that she's placed, because then she'll see you're shooting at it and she might teleport back before you can break it, but to actually shoot at her teleport entrance where she once was, because then it's going to be harder for her to tell what you're shooting at. She might think you're focusing her tank or something else, and then once you break her teleporter, the Sim is now caught behind you, and as long as your team is focusing her, it should be a pretty easy pick. You also have the chance of catching her as she teleports back when she's taking damage from someone else, and you might be able to finish her off. Next up is Cassidy. The biggest issue with Cass is that he needs to be in the close to mid-range in order to deal the most amount of damage due to damage fall-off, and he doesn't have a ton of mobility to get there in the first place. The most straightforward way to counter Cassidy is make sure you know where he is every single fight, and pay attention to whether or not he tries to go for a flank. If Cass cannot go on a flank and you're pressuring him out all the time, he's going to lose the frontline fight because he doesn't deal a ton of spam damage, and he doesn't really have a clear way to get shots off otherwise. Our next not annoying character is Soldier 76, and his biggest weakness is that he doesn't have a lot of burst damage. He really can only use his rockets to get that burst damage out, so characters that are one-shot oriented like Widow or Ashe are great against Soldier, and if you wait for him to use his rockets on a different hero, then you have a huge advantage going into the duel. Our final not annoying character, and I may get some contention on this, is Reaper. Realistically, Reaper is only annoying when he has a Lucio to speed him in and you can't get away from him, and even then there's very clear counterplay in playing high grounds and playing distance and just making sure you don't get surprised by a teleport. Okay, moving on up into the next tier, we start getting into the slightly annoying characters that I don't really have a problem dying to, but they do have some parts of their kit that I think are obnoxious to go against. Starting us off, we have Monkey, and now Monkey is a fantastic, very healthy character for the game, but I think that his shield has a little bit too much health and he has a little bit too little health. People don't like shooting shields, and that gets really annoying in ranked when a Monkey will just jump in and his shield never gets broken. It creates a lot of space for his team, and realistically it's not that hard to break the Monkey bubble, but people just don't do it in ranked. Next up we have Torb, and now Tracer mains and Genji mains will definitely disagree with me on this one, but I think that Torb is a pretty well balanced hero. His sentry does noticeable damage without it being too overkill, and his abilities are all pretty straightforward while still being good. The best way to counter Torb is playing characters that play at that mid-range and can abuse the fact that he has a really thick hitbox. So characters like Hanzo, like Ashe, like Cassidy, Soldier, those kinds of heroes. Next up in the slightly annoying tier, we have Bastion. Now, a good Bastion can definitely be oppressive when your team doesn't know how to play against him, but realistically his counterplay is very straightforward. On the support and DPS line, you just want to make sure you're playing a no damage fall off hero like Zen or Hanzo, or if you're on the tank line, you want to make sure you have a mitigation tank like Orisa or Sigma, and that's pretty much it. You're good to go against Bastion. Next up we have Wrecking Ball. Ball. Now, I think that Wrecking Ball is only not annoying right now because you can't really do much. The main trick against Wrecking Ball is making sure you don't get isolated and that you move towards your own tank whenever the Wrecking Ball starts to come after you. We'll see if he gets more annoying when he gets some damage buffs, but for now, he's not so bad. Next up is Drunker Queen, and I really like her as a tank, but I also just really hate Anti in general. The rest of her kit is fine, and the biggest way to counter her is to actually focus her backline instead of her, because she doesn't have much to protect them, and without them, she's not that tanky. Another one that I know a lot of you are going to disagree with me on, but I have Moira in the slightly annoying tier. With a little bit of aim training, she's not that hard to hit. Everyone thinks she's really hard to hit, but that's just because you get pressured, you start to panic, and then you can't hit her all of a sudden. But if you just stay calm, she's not any harder to hit than Cassidy is, in my opinion. And the rest of her kit isn't that annoying. I mean, it's all either a little bit of damage and a little bit of self-heal, or it's just healing her team a lot. There's not much that you really get pressured by. The best way to counter her is to pay very close attention to her fade and then go straight after her as soon as she's done. Our final character in the slightly annoying tier is going to be Zarya. She was really bad when she had insane bubble uptime and was always able to just kind of walk at you and kill you. She has since been tuned down a lot, and the best way to counter her is to play headshot-driven characters like Kiriko, Hanzo, Widow, those kinds of things. And the reason why is because she doesn't have a huge health pool, and her head stays very straight when she's walking around. It's a very easy animation to hit, just takes a little bit of practice. Moving on up into our mildly annoying tier, we start things off with Ana. I have had problems with Ana for a very long time now. I hate that her anti-grenade is as strong as it is, and I hate that she has one of the best CCs in the game right now. I also hate that you don't have to aim her ultimate, and the person that it hits gets a 250 bit of burst heal and takes half damage. I think it's just too much. She also has no damage fall off, has hit scan. I mean, she's really annoying to play against, but there are a lot of ways to counter her. The best way is to understand that Anas want to play at range, and you can use things like shields to block off enemy tanks, or you can focus people that are out of her LOS, and she can't really do much about that. Next up, we have Ashe. She has a ton of burst damage. It's really consistent. Her ultimate is really strong, and her dynamite is pretty annoying. She also has good mobility with her shift. Either way, the best way to beat Ashe is to play headshot-driven heroes, because much like Zarya, she has a very straight line head bob, or to play high mobility characters that can engage on her very suddenly when she's scoped in and not paying attention. She still does have to play in the mid-range. Our next mildly annoying hero is going to be Tracer. Now, Tracer does require a lot of skill to play, but you cannot deny that her high mobility coupled with her assassin-like playstyle makes her very obnoxious to play against when you're going against a good Tracer. The best way to counter her is to play characters that have either auto-aimed abilities like Torb's Turret, or can do sort of shotgun spread, that way you don't have to be as precise with your aim, such as Diva. Tracer doesn't have a lot of health, so even if you can do a little bit of spam damage with like a Lucio boop or something, you can kind of force the Tracer to play a little bit more conservatively. Our next mildly annoying hero is going to be Sigma. Sigma's damage output and his damage mitigation make him really strong on maps that have a lot of snipers like Circuit Royale or Junkertown. The best way to counter him straight up is to abuse the fact that his shield is generally going to only cover a little bit of area, and to, instead of trying to engage him directly, start taking angles around him. Take different parts of the map that he has difficulty spamming or pushing you out of, and use that to sort of collapse on him. Our next mildly annoying hero is Sombra, and ever since she first came out, Hack has always been one of those abilities that sticks out as a community stress point. However, Sombra in her current state doesn't do much else other than hack and tickle you, so she's mildly annoying because hack is still unfun to play against. But because Sombra has such weak damage output and such weak value add to her team, the best thing you can do is really put a lot of pressure on the enemy front line and make them feel the lack of DPS they have, with Sombra sort of cloaking around and looking for a flank or a hack. Next up, we have Zenyatta, and again, this is a character I think has the potential to be healthy for the game, but I really do not like his volley. Zenyatta's volley adds a ton of burst damage, especially when coupled with his Discord Orb, and it's really unfun to play against as a tank because he can do it from super far away since he has no damage fall off at all. The best way to counter Zenyatta is to use lots of natural cover and to play characters or compositions that really have a ton of mobility and can abuse the fact that Zen does not. So, you know, dive or like a Lucio rush, that kind of thing. Next, we have Baptiste, and really the only annoying thing to me about him is his insane damage and his immortality field, but otherwise he's pretty straightforward to deal with. He has to play kind of close in order to get his heals off, and if he doesn't, then you can always section him off either by diving him or putting a shield up, that kind of thing. And since he doesn't have a lot of horizontal mobility, you can always dive him and get a kill on him before he can really react. Our next mildly annoying character is Genji. Genji is not that strong right now, which doesn't make him super annoying, but he has two big issues that don't allow for a lot of counterplay that really bump him up to this tier for me. One of them is Nano Blade, which if you remember the early days of Overwatch 2 and a lot of Overwatch 1 has been just a seriously big problem. It's almost a guaranteed win. It requires very little from the Genji to actually make it happen, and there's not a ton of abilities in the game that counterplay it. And the other thing is his deflect, which you can cancel at any time and throw out a right click, which doesn't give much reaction time to the person he's fighting. The best way to counter him is to play very mobile heroes, because even though he himself is mobile, he's not great at fighting things that are very quick. You really do kind of force the Genji to hit a nice shot in order to hit you if you're on something like Tracer or if you're on Pharah or Echo. Our next mildly annoying character is going to be Mei. It's pretty straightforward. Her wall is really unfun to play against a lot of the time, especially if you're on tank and your backline doesn't ever react to it. Her ultimate is also really strong in overtime fights or in narrow chokeways, especially on a map like King's Row. By far the best way to beat her is to play spam comps that can use high grounds or a lot of verticality. You know, a character like Pharah or Echo that can fly over her wall and spam down on her where it's hard to hit. Or Baptiste, who can jump over the wall and not only spam her but also pop down an immortality field for his tank, things like that. Next up is Doomfist, and I only have him here because his stun gets pretty annoying when he's actually strong. I don't think he's that strong right now because we have a lot of tanks that are just straight up better with more CC, more frontline damage, more sustain. But even so, being stunned non-stop by a Doomfist, especially with how quick he can roll out across the map, it does get annoying, so I just have him right here in the middle. The best way to counter him is either with CC like Orisa or with just a lot of damage so that it's difficult for him to actually engage and feel safe. Our next hero is Pharah. She's definitely more spam oriented and not as bursty, which makes her a little bit more fun to play against, but for most of the cast, they can't really do anything against Pharah. Being able to stay up in the skybox where not a lot of characters can reach her and most can't do anything about her even though she has no damage fall off makes her really annoying for a lot of people to play against. I have her right here in the middle because even though she can do a lot of spam damage, her not having burst damage means a lot of the time you can get out of danger and hide for a bit or get healed. The best way to deal with her is to play a hit scan like Widow or Ana or Soldier and make her come closer to you by using natural cover to pull her around corners. Next we have D.Va, who has a lot of burst damage, so it's really easy to die to her suddenly, and her defense matrix can actually just take you out of a fight for most of it. The best way to counter her is to not get isolated from your team and play a little bit clumped up, and just make sure you focus her and take angles around her, especially when she engages. That way you can shoot her from around her defense matrix and force her to be stuck in a really bad situation, since to fly away she has to turn away from you, and she can't defense matrix you then either. Our final mildly annoying hero is going to be Lucio. I don't mind a small, very mobile character that has the potential to be an assassin and sort of isolate people and kill them, but he also has speed boost, which really paves the way for a lot of the most annoying metas in the game. If one team has a Lucio and the other doesn't, the team with the Lucio pretty much dictates every single engage. And when a team speeds into you with Lucio and you don't have one of your own, you cannot get away from them because they're just faster than you. The one thing that Lucio can't do is speed people up walls, so the best thing to do against a Lucio is play high grounds and play in a spot where he can't easily boop you off of them, and then focus on putting a lot of damage on his team since they'll be relying on only one healer because Lucio doesn't have a ton of passive heals. And now we move into the infuriating tier where the characters really get unfun to play against. We start off with Hanzo, who is just as good at getting consistent one-shots as he is at getting just random ones. The best way to fight him is to play very mobile characters like Genji or Winston that can get right up in his face and try to kill him before he can get that much value. Our next infuriating character is going to be Junkrat. Pretty much the same boat as Hanzo, can get a lot of consistent one-shots with his mine combo, but also can get a ton of just spam kills accidentally. And the best way to fight him, just like Hanzo, is mobility. His only way out is with his mines, and if he's using them to get a lot of one-shots, he's not going to be able to get away easily, and this opens up the door to be able to sort of burst him down and insta-kill him before he can get that much value. Our next infuriating character is Hog. He has gotten a lot better since he got nerfed, but he's still very annoying since he's pretty much impossible to kill, and if you get hooked into a team, you're still gonna die. By far, the best way to beat a Hog is with range, since he has no way of getting his team forward, so if you're just playing range and spamming them down a choke, it's really hard to walk in with a Roadhog. The next infuriating character is going to be Mercy. She used to not be that bad when you were able to chase her down with mobile characters like Tracer and Genji, but ever since they gave her the mobility buff in Overwatch 2, she's pretty much impossible to track down, and her damage boost adds some of the worst interactions in the game. My best way of countering Mercy is to focus her other support so she's forced to come over closer and then kill her when she gets close to you, or at the very least you get a pick on their other support because the Mercy isn't peeling. Next in our infuriating tier we have Echo. This character is just on the verge of the next tier because there's not a ton you can do against her except for play a hit scan and hope she doesn't one-shot you. The most important thing against Echo is that you are always aware of her position so she doesn't surprise you, and keep in mind the Mercy's mercy tip that I gave just a second ago, because a lot of the time the Echo is going to have a mercy, so being able to focus the enemy support is definitely an option. And now we move into the final tier, which I have called I'm refunding Overwatch 2. Whenever I'm frustrated and I stop playing Overwatch, you can pretty much bet money that one of these 5 characters is the reason why. The first one we have is Ramatra. By far, the biggest problem with Ramatra isn't even just his ultimate, but it's his block. Reducing 75% of the damage you take means that you're actually reducing more damage than a nano would, and you're still receiving the exact same amount of heals. Since his ultimate lasts forever, and he deals a ton of damage, meaning you build that ultimate very quickly, and he has a ton of self-sustain, he becomes a very annoying hero. Honestly, the only real thing you can do against Ramatra is try to find a way around him to get to his healers, that way he's forced to back off and give a little bit of space. Next up we have Widowmaker, and honestly, there are some maps where Widowmaker just has no flaws. She one-shots from across the map, she has one of the best mobility options in the game, which also lets her get shots from above and around shields. I mean, there's really just not much you can do against her. Your best bet at beating a Widowmaker is actually playing snipers of your own, like a Widow yourself or a Hanzo, and using Sonic Arrow to help your Widow if you have one, and trying to go something like Sigma to block off her angles and make it at least a little bit more difficult for her to get a shot off. Next up we have Sojourn, who is slowly starting to come down in terms of power, but has definitely been very annoying because she's just like Widowmaker, except she has way more damage output. The only real way you can beat Sojourn right now is paying very close attention to when she uses her mobility and then going on her when it's on cooldown. Next up in our list we have probably the most perfect support to ever be put into the game. She has an invulnerability on a short cooldown, she's got a teleport which gives her invulnerability and goes through walls, she has a ton of healing, she has a lot of burst damage, she has a lot of vertical mobility, in fact infinite vertical mobility because she has wall climb. I'm of course talking about Kiriko, and really the best way you can beat an enemy Kiriko is by paying attention to when she uses her teleport and going after the enemies that she is out of LOS of, because once she teleports somewhere, she's likely going to be splitting off from someone, which opens them up to being focused and killed. Our final hero in the refunding Overwatch 2 tier is going to be Orisa, and she just has way too much sustain with her cooldown rotation. Her Javelin Throw is a fantastic range CC, her Javelin Spin allows her to mitigate a ton of damage, especially when she uses her Fortify after, which gives her a little bit of burst healing and makes her damage resistant, and she's in general just very strong right now. She is a great solo carry tank. Unlike most of the other tanks, however, her biggest weakness is that she can actually not peel for her backline that well. You'll have to wait for her to come forward and create some space between her and her supports, obviously, because if she's just standing next to her supports, there's not much you can do. But if she comes forward, you can actually dive their backline with something like a Monkey or, you know, a Tracer or a Genji, and she can't do much to help. Be sure to like and subscribe if you enjoyed this for more educational news and Overwatch guide content. I will see you all again next time. Take care and peace. The absolute best way to find yourself a Valentine this year is going to be getting GM in Overwatch 2. There is no better place to find that special someone than the Overwatch 2 ranked ladder, and if you're trying to find your next high ranked honey, you need to go to GameLeap today. We have hundreds of guides with more coming every single week, designed specifically to help you soar up the ranks and find your special someone. Don't find yourself alone this Valentine's Day. Click on the link in the description below or go to GameLeap.com to get your subscription today.